Before Nuremberg, before the Geneva Convention, before international law existed. Pause. There was one trial. 1474. Breisach, Holy Roman Empire. A knight stood before a court of Swiss and German judges. Not tried for losing a battle, not tried for rebellion. Pause. Tried for atrocities against civilians, in what some historians call the first war crimes trial in history. Pause. The sentence was death, but first, they had to unmake him as a knight. Peter von Hagenbach, born around 1420 in Burgundy. A skilled soldier and commander, he served Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, one of the most powerful men in Europe. Pause. Charles appointed Hagenbach as governor of the Upper Rhine territories, a vast area including modern Alsace. Hagenbach's job was to control it, to collect taxes, maintain order, enforce Burgundian authority. Darker, he did this through terror. His soldiers looted towns systematically. They committed violence against civilians. Men were killed. Women were assaulted. Hagenbach watched, allowed it, sometimes ordered it. Pause. For years, the people of the Rhine suffered under him. While Charles the Bold was alive, no one could stop it. Then the political situation changed, and suddenly, Hagenbach had no protector. An alliance formed. Swiss cantons, Austrian Archduke, free cities of the Rhine, they had all suffered under Hagenbach. They had documented the atrocities, the murders, the assaults, the systematic plunder. Pause. Hagenbach was arrested, brought to Breisach, the city where he had committed some of his worst crimes, facing the people he had terrorized. Pause. This was unprecedented. Knights were not tried for how they treated conquered people. That was simply war. That was simply power. Nobody had ever been put on trial for atrocities against civilians. Not like this. Not formally. Not with judges and witnesses and evidence. Quietly, until now, Hagenbach had a defense. He used it confidently. It was the same defense as. He bold. His soldiers served him. He gave orders, and they obeyed. That was the chain of command. That was how it worked. He was a knight. A soldier, not a judge, not responsible for what his men did in his name. The court did not accept this defense. They ruled that a commander was responsible for the actions of his troops, that following orders was not a defense for atrocity, that some acts were wrong regardless of who commanded them. These were ideas 500 years ahead of their time. Hagenbach was convicted, sentenced to death. But here is where the medieval world asserted itself. A knight could not simply be executed. Not like a common criminal. He had to be formally degraded, stripped of his knightly status, made into a commoner. And only then could he be killed. The ceremony was deliberate, theatrical, symbolic. Hagenbach was strapped to a wooden post. He was wearing his golden spurs, the symbol of knighthood, earned through years of military service, representing everything the order stood for. The executioner raised a hammer and smashed it down on the golden spurs, shattering them into fragments. Then they brought his sword, the personal weapon he had carried into battle, laid it across a block, and broke the steel blade in half. In front of him. Only then was Peter von Hagenbach dragged to the block and beheaded. As a commoner, not as a knight. The trial of Peter von Hagenbach established principles. Revolutionary principles. A commander is responsible for what his forces do. Following orders does not absolve you. International alliances can prosecute individuals for crimes against humanity. There are some actions that no authority can legitimately command. In 1474, 500 years before Nuremberg, these ideas were spoken aloud, in a court of law, with witnesses, evidence, judgment. Were they enforced consistently after that? No. The history of warfare makes that brutally clear. Atrocities continued for centuries, and still continue today. But the principle was established. The crack appeared in the wall. The idea was spoken, that soldiers, commanders, governors could be held accountable. Must be held accountable. Peter von Hagenbach, his golden spurs broken, his sword shattered, his knighthood unmade, his head removed. He is remembered not for his military career, but for the trial, for the principle that outlasted him, for the crack in the idea that power is above accountability. Every war crimes tribunal since then, from Nuremberg to The Hague to today, has roots in that courtroom in Breisach. In 1474, sometimes the most important legacy of a man is not what he built, but what he was tried for. Subscribe, because justice, even slow, eventually arrives.